Hello and welcome to this week's version of Realism Tips. We're going to be doing so on Beasts of Bermuda today, as we did Path of Titans last week, and I'm going to be focusing on aquatic gameplay using my Mosasaurus today. We'll be getting to see some of the tips that everybody has submitted for aquatic roster. Our first tip this week is going to be on how to groom your dinosaur underwater. Obviously, aquatic creatures can get some barnacles and other parasites built up, so there's a multitude of different ways to help get some of those off. The first would be to brush up against some of the rocks. You can even just use your head to rub up against it to help scrape some of those barnacles, or just get some of the itchiest spots off. You can also use some of the seaweed that you can find located around any section of the map to just scrape against that. Could also feel potentially soothing against your skin as well. Okay, so our next tip here is going to be how to better realistically interact with the ground. As you can see, my tail is clipping quite heavily into the ground, even just trying to rest against this uneven surface. That's a problem that you're going to find a lot with aquatics whenever you are nearby the ground, is that your tail or your head is going to be clipping readily into it, or if flipper will, your belly will. Pretty much nothing has very solid collision. You can see here I can clip pretty much my entire head into the ground, which is obviously not going to be very immersive for another player coming along. So whenever you're interacting with the ground, you can try and do so a bit more subtly, so if you can brush up against it just barely, try and find that little bit where you're close to the ground but you're not actually clipping into it. There are also strafe buttons that you can use to help position yourself a bit more naturally whenever you do feel like you need to be up against the ground. You can be up against the ground to help groom yourself, scrape off some of those parasites that we were talking about before. You can be up against the ground as a means to help ambush, like if I were to sniff around, find something I want to eat here, things of that nature. But you do not want to be so far up in the ground that you are sticking straight up into it, obviously, so just try and find that balancing act whenever you are up against the ground. You can also use the ground as a sort of support system in order to help keep your leverage, and just to rest up against whenever you get tired from all that swimming you've been doing. Okay, our next tip is going to be one that's a bit more Mosa specific. So with Mosa especially, there are some other predators as well. They will use their powerful jaws in order to help subdue their prey. This is going to be especially true for younger Mosasaurus, but you can practice and hone these skills by using natural environments, such as ferns, rocks, anything of that nature. You can pretend to bite it, you can pick it up, you can give it a good thrashing. Just something to help mimic using that actual behavior. If you were to find like a spawn gore or something like that, you could use that as well. Just anything to help give your jaws a little bit of that mimicking and thrashing behavior. As an aquatic, a large part of your world is going to revolve around the air and how you interact with it. So as an aquatic, your air is a direct measure of some of your vitality. You need to surface often in order to breathe, especially as a Mosasaurus, and to a lesser extent a Kronosaurus as well. So you need to breathe often and regularly. However, a good way to also look at it is going to be the opposite. So as you get older, swimming, breathing, it's all going to become more difficult. And you might even have a difficult time surfacing in order to breathe at that regular interval. If my Mosa was getting really old and it was maybe time for her to go, then I could just struggle to surface. Maybe that's not worth it. Just struggle to move gradually, get less and less active, and then eventually suffocate and pass away, which I'm obviously not going to act out here. So opposed to never breaching ever again until it is time for your fish to move on to the other world, you can also interact with the water by the opposite way. So breaching regularly, breaching often, and even maybe breaching a bit higher, so giving yourself a little bit of a hop, or even maybe a full dart up. That can be a good way to breathe, to play, to travel, to hone your hunting skills, especially as you're young and chasing any siblings that you may have, and other things of that nature. The caveat to that is mosasaurs are very large animals, and so you don't really want to be exerting too much more effort than you'd have to, even if they are acting as pursuit hunters. So you can practice your pursuit capabilities, give it 1 or 2 good darts, maybe even not in a direct flow, maybe just give yourself a little bit of time to swim in between, go down, come back up, breach again, give yourself a little bit of air while you do so. That can all be good ways to interact with the world around you, give yourself and others a bit of a show, but you know what, now I'm a bit tired, I'm kind of done breaching for a while. So I'm not going to do so for a little bit longer, especially if, say, there was something around that I might want to hunt. I wouldn't necessarily want to give up the element of surprise even as a pursuit hunter. Okay, so another good point when it comes to the air is that every single creature in the game actually needs it to breathe, even our giant marine reptile friends here. And so it's going to actually cause a little bit more effort and take a little bit of breath to call underwater, especially as a non-aquatic or non-semi-aquatic animal. Things like para that are not suited for deep diving are going to be less inclined to call, as that is going to cause them to lose more air than normal. Even Mosasaurus may not be as likely to do so, even though it's perfectly suited for the water. Calls will carry a lot further in the water, especially deep calls like Chrono. And Chrono don't need to breathe as often as Mosasaurus do either, so that is a fact to keep in mind as well. But Mosa, who are surface animals, may find that it's a bit more appropriate to come up to the air and give their little calls that they feel is necessary up here, where they can also breathe a bit more readily.